What's up, everybody? Don D'Amato here, and welcome to another Codecast Live. It's not actually live again today, sorry. I'm actually going to be helping a friend out for the next this Monday and the following Monday, so these are pre-recorded, so I won't exactly be live. But I am doing it in one take, so there's nothing editing or anything like that. Again, I don't enjoy editing. Okay, anyway, enough about that. We're going to be talking about some CSS stuff today. We're going to be talking about the before and after pseudo elements. So let's go ahead into the code right now. I'll just bring up Chrome, switch it over. Here we go. All right. So what we have here is we're going to be working with some HTML and some CSS. We could drop down the JavaScript here. And the idea here is that what these things are elements that don't exist in HTML. These are elements that will actually be rendered in using the CSS selectors. So let's start off with something like this. We're going to go ahead and make a span like this, and we're going to put a dollar amount in it, and the dollar amount will just be like 1337. Cool. So that'll render over there, 1337. Now you'll notice I didn't put the dollar sign in here. Okay, and the reason I didn't put the dollar sign in here is this is something I used to do at one of my old jobs, which I actually don't do anymore because of accessibility problems, and I'll talk about it in a little while. But let's put a little style for this. We'll put a little do the color as green because that's, you know, color money, and we'll make the font size, let's make it 24 pixels, nice and big. Cool. Okay, so we have a little style to the span, which is nice. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually put a dollar sign before it. So in order to do that, I put a span, colon, before. And sometimes they use double colon. I'm a little lazy, so I just do one colon. Now, nothing's going to happen unless I put this property called content. And what content provides is usually a string, so I could put a single or double quote there. And then what I'll do is I'll put the dollar sign here. And what you'll see is the dollar sign actually appears before the content of the span. You can see actually I can't select it. And that's a big deal for the accessibility pieces because when a screen reader actually goes through this, it won't recognize the dollar here. So what I would need to do is do either some kind of ARIA label or some other kind of implementation that would actually read the dollar amount here. But for the display purposes, this is actually works really nice because not only can I do content like this, but I can also read it as a data attribute, which is really cool. So what I can do is I can add a data attribute here, so I could say data currency like this and put in the currency I'm going to be using. So we'll put a dollar sign here. All right. Now the next thing I can do is I can say attribute, which is a function, you see that there, and then data currency. And what that's going to do is going to read the value from the HTML. So now I could put in like pounds. I don't know how to do that in my keyboard. I'll just put an L over there for pounds. There you go. So you can see anything that I put in here ends up being rendered in the content area for the span here. Now, let's say I just wanted to do this for data currencies. We didn't do it for all span before is here because this is going to get all spans. It's going to try to read this thing. So I can actually target everything that has a currency instead. So I could say data currency like that. And now this will always render for anything that has a data currency. So if I use a div or a span or a paragraph, all of that stuff is going to read just like that. So let's do a paragraph with this here now. Just a paragraph tag. And I can put in another price. Let's do 88.00. Fine. Okay. So now again, we don't have anything on there. And we can just go say data currency and put in the currency there. And boom, there it is. Okay. So we got the currency right there. Cool. All right, so now what does this actually look like in the DOM? So if I actually do a little inspect on this, where's my inspect? There it is. What you'll see is if we twirl this down, not only do we have the content here, but we also have this pseudo element, the before here, and you can see it being added over here. Now we can also add additional styles to this. This doesn't mean that we have no styles in the before here. We can add additional styles. So if I can add it here as well. Let's do it as a background red. Let's see what happens. Yeah, so you can see that there. So each data currency is a background red. So you can see that this is acting very much like an element, but it isn't actually a real element. So one of the big parts about this is that you can't select the before or the after using JavaScript. It only exists in CSS. It's only rendered that way. So you can't do any kind of manipulation with the JavaScript. However, we can manipulate, you know, the data attribute on the HTML element and change this content so that the CSS will actually render it using the attribute function here. Okay, so again, the whole thing that's happening here is that in HTML, I have this attribute that I made up, totally made up this attribute. It has a value, okay? And now what we're doing is we're selecting everything that has the attribute of data currency. We're going to create a pseudo element by selecting the pseudo element, okay, the before version. And then the content is required for the pseudo element, so we need to have that as the property here. And then there's a function, and it's a CSS function. It's a native function called attr. And then it takes one parameter or one argument, and that argument is going to be the representation of the attribute. Okay, so whatever attribute that ends up being in here, you could do things like ID. We could do an ID in here also. This would totally work. You could say ID money, right? So if I did ID money in there, all I could do is just say, well, the attribute's name is ID, and it'll put money in front of here. See that? Well, because this one doesn't have an ID on it, it doesn't have anything to put in front. Okay, so that's what the before thing does, and the after also works the exact same way. If I wanted to put something after, like let's do a class for this guy here, and we could say 88, just like that, or 80. I'm gonna spell 80 right. There you go. Now I could say P after. I could say content, and again, I could just put whatever I want here. So I could actually just say whatever, and it'll appear afterwards. And I actually could space it out too. Let's space it. Let's put a margin left, and then we'll just do like 12 pixels real quick. So you could space it out 12 pixels, which is cool. So you can actually have like some spacing in there. So I could even say like $88, right? So you could do that if you want. But I could also read the class here, which is totally fine. I could do that by just going in saying attr class, and puts the class there. Okay, so that's what you could do with that. Now, there's a lot of different uses for this past just doing this. You can make things like a separator for breadcrumbs. I'll come back to me over here. You can make a separator for breadcrumbs, so you have the breadcrumbs that are spaced out between where you are, and then there may be like a separator, so you may have like a little arrow that goes there, or a slash that goes to the next thing. What else can you do? You might have seen something called the Clearfix Hack, which was something we used to do for fixing float layouts, which would use this after pseudo element using the content being blank, actually, which is just empty string. Then you would clear the floats for that, which would appear, of course, after the element that you're using. And then you usually use display block or display table, was an older version of it, to make sure that it would, clear the line. Something I would probably go over now because, again, we have much better methods of laying out things like flexbox and grid, so we don't need to do all those hacks anymore. But it's something you might have seen when you've seen like this after pseudo element. So I actually don't like using them so much unless I'm doing some really weird hackery for CSS. Maybe I'll do some little things for animations or other things that are not necessarily relevant to a particular interface or experience. Just as like maybe I need an additional element, I don't want to like add the additional HTML to render just a little box. So I might do some before or afters in order to do that. You could actually check out my code pen. A lot of the CSS stuff that I actually have up on the front uses some before and afters just for display purposes. So anyway. That's it for today, and again, if you've enjoyed this, leave a like on the video, comment down below if you have any questions, and otherwise, again, I'm going to see you guys another recording, I think, next week, and we'll probably do some JavaScript, but we'll see what happens. All right, anyway, till next week.